Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Why of It All podcast. I'm Gina and this is my lovely co-host, Melanie.
Hello, welcome.
So nice to be back again with everybody and be back with my bestie.
This is episode 4.
It is.
We are on a roll here. We are doing the thing.
We are. And today is going to be a great episode. And today, our episode, we're going to actually be talking about grief and healing. And I want to preface the podcast a little bit, or today's discussion, and just ask the question, why are we talking about this? Melanie and I, off of the microphone, have had so many deep conversations about this throughout our friendship. And we just thought, you know what? We've been talking about it for years. And if maybe somebody out there listening needs to hear this today to continue on their healing journey, we just thought, why not bring it to the forefront of our discussion today? And also too, I do want to tell everybody and give you a permission slip. This is going to be a heavier episode. And so, if you're struggling with something right now, and if something is heavy for you, we're not claiming to know all the answers. We don't have all the answers, but we can promise you that we're going to have some real conversations today about it, and we're each going to have very different perspectives on a lot of the things.
I think we might.
It'll be great because
Yeah.
you can get the differences, and maybe something that one of us says is going to resonate with you.
Exactly.
So we're just going to talk about what healing looked like for us, and maybe offer some hope to our listeners. Right?
Exactly.
That sounds good.
And if you need to take a little time out and come back to it later, that's okay. Some of these topics are going to get kind of heavy, and we touched on a little bit of our grief stories in the Q&A from episode 2 and 3, but we're going to deep dive a little bit more today. So join us, come along for the ride.
And if this is an episode that you need to wait a couple of weeks to listen to, come back. It's always going to be there on all major platforms.
I think we're unselling ourselves.
Let's
not unsell ourselves. However, we understand that this is a nut cruncher kind of subject. So we want you to all know that we are here to support you. Our purpose here is to be a source of light and upliftment. And
I'm laughing because we both use the phrase nut cruncher. And I
got it from you. You've been saying nut cruncher as long as I've known you, full 25 years.
I love nut cruncher. Why?
So do I.
It
paints a picture.
It does.
It paints a picture.
I love it. Okay, starting off with a little laughter.
Let's get to the nut cruncher.
Let's get to the nut cruncher of the episode.
Oh, good. We're going to have fun too. Yay.
We are going to have fun. It's going to be heavy, but it's going to be funny at the same time. I think it may be, if Gary graces us with his presence, hopefully it's not barfing. Maybe it's.
I would prefer that it wasn't barf this time, but we'll see.
Because you have to clean it up.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Melanie, when you think about healing from grief, what does it actually mean to you? Like, what does healing from grief mean to you? And I know that's broad, but what does it actually mean to you to heal from grief or from dark places you've been?
Such a good question.
No,
there's probably a bunch of different directions we can go with that, I think for me, healing from grief. Okay, so the obvious part of it is not feeling like you are in the depths of despair anymore, right? Having processed through it to the point where you are capable of achieving higher vibrational emotional states without getting sucked back down into the lower states of sadness and everything that comes along with that. So that's the obvious part of it. For me, I think what I would add to that is coming out of the resistance to what happened, getting to a state of allowance and acceptance for what has occurred.
Yeah.
And for many people, that's the piece of the puzzle that gets in the way, I think, of moving through things. Oftentimes what we're grieving from is something that cannot be undone.
True.
And
a lot of the grief cannot.
Right. And as long as we are in resistance to what is, it's a recipe for getting stuck in what is, particularly when it's a situation that cannot be undone. So I say for me, that's what healing is. It's coming out of resistance and into acceptance and allowance. And from there, finding taking those incremental steps up the emotional ladder as you start to feel better and better over
I
time.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it because I'm going to take it somewhere a little different. For me, when I think about that question, when I personally reflect on what it means to me, I think that my mind goes to times where I thought I was supposed to be feeling better or supposed to be more healed from the grief. I don't think maybe we mentioned this, but I lost my father in May of 2022. So we're coming up on almost 3 years, which I cannot believe it's been almost 3 years. It feels like it was just yesterday
wild,
sometimes, right? And so I think when I think about that, I realize that healing looks different for everybody.
Absolutely.
And so there have been so many times after my father's death that I felt like, because I have 3 other siblings, and of course my mom and my son, another extended family, but the ones I was closest to during this time, of course my friends, but like my family, we were all gathered, at the house and for the weeks after that and funeral and all that. And I just remember thinking, like, 'cause at the funeral, I remember walking behind the casket and going, doing the procession basically. And I was the only one that was like, oh, do you remember? I was the only one just like bawling.
Yeah.
And so, and then there were other times too, right after he passed, and we're all at the house, and I go into the closet and I see all his clothes and I lose it. And I just start put my head on the table, like the heavy wailing, that sobbing that just kind of is uncontrolled, almost primal. And I remember my sister-in-law coming to comfort me. And anyway, and then, anytime we get together for like family gatherings, Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter and things like that, it's like, I feel sometimes, and this is just me, it's nobody making me feel this way, but I feel like I'm supposed to be further along in this grief journey of losing my father, because that's to me been the biggest grief experience that I've had so far. I've lost a couple of grandparents, but it's nothing like losing a parent.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
You understand. So I just think me giving myself grace and allowing this process to be individualized for me, and to not look at anybody else's, what it looks like to them and think, oh, why am I not already, feeling better? Or why am I still crying 3 days a week? Or why am I, any of those things? I just think me giving myself allowance and grace to have this be my own journey, individual journey.
And that is, it's so true that everybody's process is going to look different.
Yeah.
There isn't a right way to grieve. And we want to be really clear here. As Gina said before, like, this is definitely not us imparting wisdom upon you because we've got it all figured out.
No, not at all.
There's not a right way to do it. And something that I was thinking about is how many points of views and beliefs we take on from other people in our lives about what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So there are people out there who perhaps have the point of view that a healthy grieving process means keep it together.
Right.
And for others, the healthy grieving process looks like feeling the feelings.
Cry.
And there's a whole spectrum of everything in between that. I think what you're talking about here is not judging your process. That's really important. It goes hand in hand with the resistance to what is. If as soon as you go into judgment about something, you have saddled yourself with it. You are locked into a fixed point of view about what's right and what's wrong about it. And that's a really good way to get stuck in it. So having grace for yourself, exactly is what you just said. Having grace for yourself and understanding that my process is my process. I do think, world according to Melanie, that it is important to make sure that we are being intentional and being mindful throughout our process so that we don't get stuck in it.
Sure.
So I guess where I'm going with that is, if someone is stuck, we want to not be stuck. But judging yourself for being stuck is also not is
Not
something
the way
that
to go.
it's not the way to go. It's not necessary. And remembering to have grace for wherever you're at is where you're at. It is just a current state of being. It's just current events, and events can change.
This is a perfect segue into the next question.
Fantastic. I love it when that happens.
This is
I love
perfect.
it when that happens.
Melanie, do you think healing is ever finished? Or do you think it's something that keeps changing? Isn't that a great question?
I like that. Yeah.
Do you think healing is ever finished?
I mean, again, world according to Melanie, I think yes. I think you can get to completion in healing. And then it evolves into the next stage, which is growth. Yeah, I really do think so. It's just that, again, always remembering, of course, healing isn't linear. And so you might at times think that you've gotten through all the deep layers of some process that you're working on. And then sometime in the future, something happens, there's a trigger, and you feel things coming right back up. And you're like, crap, I thought I was past that. Why is this coming back up again? And you realize there was deeper layers there. There was more connections to other things in your life that you didn't know existed. And this is a new opportunity to address it yet again from this new place that I'm at this point in my life.
Yeah.
I do think it's possible to get down to all of the beliefs and all of the points of views and all of the things that keep us stuck in our wounds with intentionality. And then from there, the focus can shift into how do I grow from this? And the evolution can be your continual growth from this past experience that was once a deep, open, painful wound for you, but now it's your source of inspiration.
I love that. And I think we have slightly different perspectives on it. I don't know if my healing's ever going to be finished when I'm talking about the aspect of grief, and that's the main topic today. I feel like healing from grief, I feel like it keeps changing, because I just know what I've noticed in myself the last 3 years. I noticed that it's always there, right? I always miss my father. I always think about my father. I always want to honor my father in everything I do. But I'm not crying every day. But there may be days that I do let it out. There might be something that triggers me, an old wound that pops up. I have to tell a story. Like, my son is 14 years old. He was 11 when his grandfather passed away. And yes, he cried when it all first happened. And he's been such a strong young man through all this. And about a week ago, he had taken a shower and he came into my room. I don't know if I told you this, but he was bawling.
Oh, wow.
He came into the room and he was bawling. And I was like, baby, like, he doesn't cry all the time. He's 14. He's a teenager. And he comes into my room and he's like, I'm like, baby, what's wrong? And he's like, I miss Grandpa. I miss Grandpa. And he comes around and lays with me in the bed. And I just hold him and hug him. And, nothing about, like, we talk about my father a lot, but it's never like, usually I'm the one crying. And he's the one like, Mom, it's okay. Grandpa's still here. We had a lot of good times, blah, blah, blah. And so I am now having to be the strong one and comforting him. And, I thought that he was healed. I thought that he was past.
Like over it.
Yeah, because we hadn't talked about it in so long from his perspective. And one thing that he said to me that, again, I had these revelations, again, why this grief is ever changing. We're sitting in bed. And so when I was young, my father after school would take me to McDonald's. Like, it was our little thing. It was my little treat. We went to McDonald's after school, and he would sit and make his little to-do list, his little written to-do list on his little notepad for the next day. And I would play on the jungle gym. Well, until my father got very sick, he picked up my son from school and took him to McDonald's. So it's like, yes, we have a long lineage of unhealthy eating in our family. We have a long lineage of American culture, McDonald's. And so my son is in athletics and all this kind of stuff. And so My mother now, since my father is gone, my mother takes my son and picks him up and takes him to McDonald's. And there's times where I get on him. I'm like, son, why not? Because I haven't had McDonald's in, I don't know, how long, 15 years? I don't know, 20 years. And so anyway, we're talking and he's like, Mom. And so there are times that I tell my son, I'm like, Max, why don't you not eat McDonald's? Like, try to stop doing that 3 times a week. Like, maybe go to Subway or get a smoothie or something. And so we're laying there and he's crying and I'm holding him and he's like, Mom, do you know why I like to go to McDonald's? And I was like, why? And he's like, because Grandpa took me there.
Yeah.
And I never thought, I never connected those pieces. That's why he still likes to go to McDonald's. Not so much for the food, because it makes him feel close to his grandfather.
Yeah.
And I, as a mother, was just oblivious to that fact. And I just thought, wow, like just listening to him and just hearing his perspective on my father's passing, it just lets me know that, it just keeps changing. It just keeps evolving. And it was nice to finally be the person that wasn't bawling, because I was getting choked up now, but like when you see your kid crying and getting upset, like you want to comfort them. You need to be the strong one.
Yeah.
Right. And so
also it gives you permission to, again, have grace for yourself for where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it does. So anyway,
knowing that the people you thought were so healed already.
Yes.
Or maybe still in their process as well.
They are.
And
he is.
It's such a big piece of the puzzle, having grace for yourself.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
And also seeing his little journey and seeing that, no, he's not all healed from this. There's going to be times that are going to pop up right in our lives where I need to be that strong person for him. I need to be the rock that he needs.
But also, I want to point out another thing too.
Yeah.
In that moment, you were able to.
I was.
In that moment, you were able to rally whatever strength you needed to be there for him. And you didn't collapse into like a puddle of useless, whatever on the floor. Like, you were able to pull whatever strength you needed and be there for him. So you have it.
And 6 months ago, I don't know if I would have been able to. I think I've done a lot of great work in the last 6 months, even just 6 months.
But also maybe you could have.
Maybe.
It's a possibility.
It's possible.
That's another piece of it. Not only having grace and forgiveness and understanding for yourself and what you're going through, but also it's a great reminder not to underestimate ourselves either.
So true.
Coming out of the judgment.
Yeah.
Letting go of the judgment of I don't like where I'm at with this. Okay. It's one thing to acknowledge where you're at, and it's just an observation. It's another thing to judge it as wrong.
True.
And that judgment will lock you into it. So even just taking a moment to go, you know what? I was able to just be there for him. I didn't get sucked into my own despair. I was able to be the strength that he needed me to be in that moment so that he was supported.
And that felt good.
And having gratitude for yourself and how far you've come, recognizing your strength in that moment and letting go of the judgment of where you're at.
Yeah.
So important.
Super important.
Good for you.
Yes. Healing as we speak. Melanie, what are some things, like even small things, that actually helped in your grief healing process? If you could think about one or a couple of things, they don't have to be big, but anything that you did or said or any action that you took.
So I'm a vibration person. I talk a lot about the vibrational ladder, the emotional ladder, and how you've got the very negative emotions down at the bottom of the ladder and the very high positive emotions are up at the top. And it's very difficult to get from here to here in a big leap. Most of us have heard about affirmations and have used affirmations through their lives. And in many cases, affirmations are extremely helpful as little reminders to be intentional and deliberate with your mindset. And that's all good. But putting a sticky note of "I'm happy" on your mirror when you are in a state of utter despair, can't get there from there. That's like putting a happy face on your gas gauge when your gas tank's empty.
True.
Right?
That's a good analogy.
It's going to be a problem. However, what you can do is make small incremental choices in your day-to-day life little things that you add that bring your vibration up just a little bit more. Something simple. For me, it would be remembering to put some sort of essential oils in my aromatherapy diffuser. Just something like lavender and, ylang ylang, or something that when my physical body experiences this sensation, it's something that brings me joy, something that makes me happy. Playing soft, calming, beautiful music, doing things for myself, small things for myself that are little things that take me from the lower vibrational stage. Just one rung up at the ladder is all you need.
Sounds like you're trying to regulate your nervous system.
Absolutely.
Right?
That ends up being what you're doing. Sure. But adding these little steps, little by little, and little by little, you get up the ladder.
True.
But what ends up happening in a lot of people's cases is they try to climb too high too fast, and then they get mad at themselves because they can't achieve it. It's too big a leap. So oftentimes, again, going back to grace, having grace for where you're at, not judging it, but recognizing, okay, I can make small choices every day to do things for myself, to think the next higher thought. Going from everything sucks to this is difficult, but I'm moving through it. And then from this is difficult to, and I'm moving through it to, I know that I'm going to get past this.
Yeah.
And then I know that I'm going to get past this to, I'm beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then I'm beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel too. Wow, I'm actually starting to feel a little bit better. It's incremental. And that was probably many months or potentially years for some people.
Let's be clear, this doesn't happen
that
overnight.
little narrative there.
Yeah.
But that was something that was very helpful for me in really every single grief process that I've been through, which has been many in my life, to help me make my way through the process. The difference is you have to make those choices. They're not going to just happen for you. It's an intentional choice that no matter what, I'm going to take one small step every day or multiple small steps every day. I'm going to be intentional with my thoughts. I'm not going to let myself get stuck here. I'm not going to let myself marinate in the depths of despair indefinitely. I am going to move my way through this. And for me, those little incremental steps are what helped me.
I love that. I think for me, it's been some of those things too, but for me, it's been action. So about a year after my father passed, he was cremated and we all split his ashes up with the the 4 of us kids and my mom. And about a year after he passed, we took his ashes to the beach. So I scooped up some of, the ashes out of his urn and took those to the beach and we released them and we did a prayer and we were all together. So for me, it's been like tangible physical things that I've done to help me in this process.
Like symbolic gestures.
Thank you. Symbolic. Yeah. Yes, that's the word. Because another thing is, if you know me well, I have tattoos. You can't see them really from the podcast, but if you know me well, I have a lot of tattoos. And so one of the things for me that helped me in my process too was getting a couple of tattoos. So I had the idea of finding a couple of cards that my father had written me throughout the years, birthday cards or whatever. And I have 2 tattoos with his writing on it. One of them says stay positive, and it's in my father's writing. And then another one is on my outside of my left thumb and it says love you, Dad. So just things like that. And then I also have a red cardinal little bracelet. And so every time I look at that, I'm just reminded. So for me, it's those symbolic things, I think, that have helped me kind of continue to grow and heal from this process.
And what is it about those symbolic gestures that creates relief for you?
I guess it's a form of me taking action in whatever way that looks like for me. Like for me, I had a love of tattoos before my father passed, but for me, it was important to have his writing on my body forever. I think it's the sheer part of just me taking action and doing these little things that have just kind of helped me feel closer to him, helped me maybe symbolically release him. All of those things I feel like have just added up to
perhaps an honoring of him.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's been all of those things. And all of those little things, when you add them all up, that's what's gotten me to here, to where I could hold my son a couple of weeks ago and not cry and stay grounded and stay strong. I think it's just an addition, like you said. You can't get up to the top quickly. It takes some time. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination there yet. I don't feel like I'm healed from my father's passing. I still have a lot of wounds to work through. This is just where I am right now with you on March 11th, 2025. Right?
Is that what day this is?
That's what day this is.
Yeah, I can't
You've been
keep track.
traveling.
I've been traveling.
You've been traveling. It's March 11th.
If my voice sounds weird to you guys on the microphone, it's because I'm hoarse from staying up till 2 a.m. and partying in Vegas for the last 4 days with about 300 friends of mine.
And if you know Melanie, that is very out of character.
Very out of character. I
Melanie
stayed up way past my bedtime.
I don't even know the last time I stayed up till 2 a.m. It was a lot. I don't even remember.
I was just being an animal. That's
you
crazy.
You are.
Anyway, so I hope I sound extra sexy.
Yeah, you do. But you always sound sexy. Got that little raspy.
Oh.
Okay, this is a good one. Melanie, what's something grief revealed to you? Maybe whatever, maybe about love, life, or yourself. What did grief, and maybe you want to touch on maybe something that you've had to grieve. I know a couple of things specifically, but what did it reveal to you about your life or yourself?
Yeah, there's a particular example that comes to mind when you ask me that question. About 4 years ago, I lost my soul dog. Her name was Brooklyn. She was a beautiful Doberman Pinscher, and she did not leave my side for a decade. And when I say she didn't leave my side, I mean damn near never left my side. Came to the office with me every day. She was my office manager. She was a Velcro dog. I might have had to run a few errands without the dog, but that was about it. So I got Brooklyn during a time in my life where I had, for the first time ever, had left home. I grew up in Austin, Texas, lived there my entire life, and then decided once I had graduated from acupuncture school and I was ready to start my career, I decided that I needed to relocate because the market was saturated where I was. So I picked up and moved, and within a very short period of time, I was homesick. I was homesick, and I was definitely missing family. I had never lived away from my family, at least not in the same city. I mean, so I decided that the best thing for me at the time would be to get a dog. All my life, I had lived with dogs, but they were my dog. It was a family dog, so I was really excited to get the first dog that was going to be my dog. And Brooklyn, it became very, very clear, very, very quickly that she was not just a dog.
How long were you in Scottsdale before you got Brooklyn? How long had you been there?
Weeks.
Oh, really?
Maybe a month or two.
Okay.
I mean, it was
pretty quickly
very, very
after
quickly.
you moved. Okay.
Yeah. And so it became very, very clear that this relationship that we had was way more than any relationship with any animal that I had ever had in my life. And she and I just had such a deep, deep connection. And here I am living in this new city, away from my family, away from all of my resources, and away from all of the things that the familiarity that allowed me to feel safe and secure. And I was out here doing this brand new thing, doing something scary, stepping out on my own. And Brooklyn, she was a Doberman Pinscher. I felt so safe with her. I mean,
you were safe with her.
That's what they're bred for. They're bred for personal protection. They are literally the only breed of dogs on the planet that are bred to be glued to their person's side at all times and keep you safe from your hip. And she nailed it. Actually, it is my belief that she saved my life on more than one occasion. So when she passed, it was intense. It was intense. I'd never, at that time, and what's funny about it is, this feels really weird to say out loud. I had lost a child just a few short years before that.
Before you lost Brooklyn.
I guess it was more than a few years. Brooklyn died in 2020, and I'd lost Jackson passed away in, it was 2014 or 15.
So 5-6 years.
I grieved just as much when Brooklyn died.
You did.
And me being me, it wasn't too long after allowing myself to feel the feelings for a while. It wasn't too long before I started reaching out on a soul level to her and asking questions. Why? What is here for me? How do I move through this transition? This is a big change. And I believe that when you go through these transitions and these changes, there's always an opportunity there. It's my personal belief, world according to Melanie, again, my favorite saying, by the way, you guys will figure that out, that nothing happens to us. Everything happens for us. And so I was asking, what is the value here? What is the gift? What is the opportunity? What is it that I can step into with this new space that's been made available by her passing?
Yeah.
And I heard in my head, it's time for you to self-source your own security. And when I heard that, it was a big nut cruncher. It was a big nut cruncher for me because
Epiphany.
It was an epiphany. I didn't realize that I had been outsourcing my safety and security to her all of those years, which is retarded because of course I was. I bought a Doberman picture for God's sakes. Of course I was outsourcing my security to her. But what I heard is that she passed when she did because I've now reached a stage in my own personal growth where it's time for me to step into my own self-sourcing of my feelings of safety and security instead of outsourcing them to her. And when I heard that, it was like, okay, got a job to do now. I got to be, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that look like? How do I do that?
What a gift, though.
And that became the next step of my healing journey in moving through that particular grief process.
I love that.
And maybe there's times where I'm not quite there yet, but I will say, after she passed, I was checking door locks 2 or 3 times every night before I went to bed.
Were you?
I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of feelings of lack of security,
not feeling safe.
And
because, like, your husband travels for work.
Yes,
he does travel for work.
Piece of puzzle there.
You are home, alone.
Yeah, but it's been many years since I've done that.
Yeah,
and I think maybe I could say that I'm pretty much there. I mean, there's very, very, very few times where I'm concerned about my well-being now in terms of safety and security. So maybe I should give myself more credit for being farther along in that department than up until this very second I considered.
This is why we're doing this podcast. Look, this just happened. The why of it all. This is why she just had an epiphany. I love this. This is like the ooey gooey reason that we're doing this. I love it. Something that I learned about grief, dealing with the death of my father, really about love. And this is a tough one for me. I'm going to try to not cry because I'm a crybaby. I've already gotten sad and my makeup looks good today. So I'm going to try to not. And I think we've talked about this before, but I'm going to be really vulnerable here and say that, you knew my father. We know each other's fathers. And my father was a very sturdy, strong, disciplinarian, hardworking. There wasn't a lot of emotion that I saw growing up. So growing up, really, I got my emotional security from my mother. My mother's the soft, nurturing. I mean, that's just how it was. My father was an amazing provider. My father was an amazing father, very, very always pushing us and motivating us. And, but there wasn't a lot of, I know your father's a lot more ooey gooey. He's
very,
your father cries. Like
my dad cries more than you do, but it's always happy cry.
Yes. And honestly, the one time let me tell you this, the one time I saw my father cry in my whole, however many years until he died, 47, I was very sick. I was going through, I was having panic attacks. And if you've ever experienced a panic attack, you feel like you're dying. I I went to the ER 4 nights in a row. Like I was on a tailspin for a certain time, I think back in 2016. And Melanie, you saw me through a whole panic attack episode too when we lived together.
We lived together
back in the years ago.
Yep.
I don't want to think about what year that was. But anyway, the most recent, I was very sick. And at the time I was building my house and I was living with my parents, which was tough in itself. But thank God, actually, I was at the time. But I was so sick. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. And the doctor had given me an antidepressant to take. And I was so resistant because I don't want to be on any pharmaceuticals. I can do this myself. I just need to pray. I just need to blah, blah, blah. And it was like the 4th or 5th day with basically, I was losing weight all week. I hadn't slept. I'm sure I looked horrible. And I had this medication and I wouldn't take it. And I literally wouldn't take it. And so after another night at the ER, I'm in my room and my father comes in and he looked at me and he started crying. And I mean, again, never seen my father cry, not really. And so he's like, I'm really worried about you. You have to take that medicine. You have to take that medicine. And when I saw him crying, begging me basically to take it, that's when I took it. It was literally seeing my father go, you have to do this for yourself. So anyway, that's a side note, but talking about my father being strong, what I learned about love and about myself through my father's passing, and this is probably going to hit a chord with women or men, but because my father was not very emotionally available growing up, again, I always put him on this pedestal and always looked at him as like this, my hero, but didn't have a lot of emotional, like I didn't grow up. I mean, he was very physical with us and, obviously very hands-on and everything, but never like sitting me and I was like, I'm so proud of you, or you're so beautiful. Or,
he wasn't a words of affirmation person.
Thank
How
you.
about that?
He was not a words of affirmation.
And
man.
you are.
And I am. And so what I discovered, what was revealed to me through his passing is that throughout my life, in my intimate relationships, romantic relationships with men, I innately choose men that are emotionally unavailable. It's when I look back at the history of my big relationships and the men that I've stayed with the most, any relationship over 2 years, most of them have been emotionally unavailable men, which has caused a lot of heartache for me, truthfully.
Yeah.
But I think that I never wanted to speak a bad thing about my father. And it's not speaking bad about him. It's just stating the facts.
It's observing what was.
It's observing what was and accepting what was. And I think it was through his passing that I accepted, okay, he wasn't emotionally really available, but he was all these other things. But right, you sit in what's comfortable to you, right? If you grew up with a father that was emotionally unavailable, you're probably more comfortable with men that are emotionally unavailable.
Well,
right?
Again, we talked about this last time. We talked about this a bit. We touched on it a little bit with the Q&As. As children, from an immature mind, you are forming beliefs about yourself and the environment that you're growing up in, and what is true and right about the world. You're forming these beliefs based on the experiences that you're having, and you're coming to conclusions, making assumptions to the best of your ability, but you're an immature child with an immature understanding of the world. Yeah. So your father, who loved you to death,
he did,
an amazing, loving, wonderful father. But what was his love language? Acts of service?
Probably more acts of service, I would say.
Right. So he did show love, but he showed it in his way.
Right.
And you as a child, as a words of affirmation person, were not receiving the love in the way that you receive it. And you didn't know, you didn't have anyone explain to you,
right,
this is how dad shows love. When dad does this for you, he's loving you.
Right.
When dad provides for you, that's how he shows his love. Nobody explained that to you.
Right.
So you're in your mind, you're sitting here going, I feel like I'm not getting what I need here.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know. from his perspective, he is loving you. He's loving you in his own way.
Yeah.
As adults,
So
doing the work, doing the introspection, taking a look at the beliefs and thoughts, feelings, and emotions that we've been operating from our whole lives. Part of that healing process is looking back at the points of views that we've taken from that immature state of being that we're still operating from, even though now we have a different understanding. Now we know about love language. This is just an example of the love languages thing, but now we know, and we can look back and let go of the old limitation programs and the old beliefs that we don't need to keep operating from. And what I'm hearing you say, as you are recognizing this pattern that you've had of choosing emotionally unavailable men, because that was what was imprinted upon you as a child, and you formed beliefs about your own worth that weren't accurate.
Right.
Because your dad loved the crap out of you.
He did, but it was a programming.
It was a belief you came to based on your experience, but it was based on a misunderstanding of what was true. So now you get to say, okay, I understand this about myself. I no longer need to keep operating from this program, and starting to recognize your own value and your own worth that you convinced yourself you didn't have.
Yeah.
And once you do that, you're not going to tolerate emotionally unavailable men anymore.
Yeah.
You start making different choices because you've changed the beliefs.
Yeah. It's just so hard to reprogram.
It can be.
Years and years of,
it can be.
Just that belief system.
It
takes work.
It takes work.
A lot of work.
It takes work. It takes commitment, and it takes vulnerability. That is a big piece. A lot of people have trouble going down and being vulnerable with themselves. And there's so many layers to it. But it takes that willingness to be vulnerable, be real and honest with yourself, have forgiveness and grace for yourself for doing the best you could with the information you have had at each moment of your life.
Yeah, in this process.
And as you learn more, okay, now you've got more information, and now your best doing the best you can is just going to get better and better and better.
Yeah.
As we move through this ever-present healing journey.
I love that. Okay. We have got another question. Might be our last one. But Melanie, have you ever surprised yourself in this grief healing process? Like, wow, I didn't know I could get through that. Like, was there any example of like, wow, like, how did you surprise yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, that again, we're going to repeat ourselves from time to time here, but in the last episodes, we talked about how I lost a child.
Yeah.
In 2014, well into the pregnancy. And that healing, that process that we went through, we made it through because we were intentional about it.
Yeah.
And in our case, it took using many, many tools, doing a lot of belief work in the darkest moments. What did I do to deserve this? For example.
Yeah.
How did I create this? How did I get myself into this?
How did this happen to me?
How did this happen? Exactly.
Yeah.
Doing the introspection. So not just going through the grief process, which of course looks like, and we talked about this last time, but allowing myself to feel those feelings in the waves that they would come.
Yeah.
Going through the process of feeling the deep welling up of emotion, allowing myself to release it in the moment.
Yeah.
But being deciding that in every one of those moments of despair, those moments of grief, that I was going to be sensitive enough and pay close attention to that wave of emotion, because that's how it shows up, right? It comes in waves. Most people aren't just like completely laid out indefinitely, right? No. It comes in waves.
Yes.
So recognizing and knowing that that's going to be the case, and feeling the wave of emotion well up, allowing myself to process through those emotions, but in the back of my mind, constantly monitoring for that moment where the wave of emotion sort of peaks and then it dissipates just the slightest little bit. And for me, it was about releasing that valve.
Mm.
And as soon as I would feel the peak of that emotion and then feel it start to dissipate, I would go, okay, now we're on the tail end of this wave.
I can do this.
And I'm going to move, and I'm moving through the tail end of this wave. It's beginning to dissipate, acknowledging that wave, acknowledging the process of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you acknowledge it and you're like, okay, now it's on the way down. Cool.
I got through it.
I got through it.
Yeah.
And then deciding, okay, I'm done with that for now.
Yeah.
Cool. Made it through that one. I'm done with it for now. Not staying focused on it, not marinating in it, but allowing the waves to come and acknowledging the end of each wave, acknowledging that I'm making the choice not to marinate in this. And then as soon as that wave is done, I'm moving on with my day.
And you're going to keep going.
Or I do something. We talked about the little small incremental things, the little things that you can do in your life to raise your vibration. Whatever that is. It's hard to come up with examples. I only have my own examples, but there's, what everybody does out there to self-soothe is going to be different. Never toxic self-soothing, by the way, though. Never drugs, never alcohol.
Right.
Never self-pity. Because there's judgment in that. So in that moment, without judgment, just observing the experience that I'm having. I'm feeling the wave of emotion. Here it comes. I'm releasing it now. Okay, cool. That's over. Now what? And then choosing to do things beyond that are going to raise my vibration. There was also the belief work that was a big part of that. When I would doubt myself, when I would question my worth and my value, when I would question my future, am I ever going to have a child? Am I incapable of it?
Yeah.
When those dark thoughts would come up, I would go, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there.
Stop yourself.
I would just recognize it, but you can't judge it. Because again, as soon as you judge something, you've locked it in. So you can't judge it. You're just sort of in an observation state. And like, oh, look at that thought. Ooh, I don't like that. Okay, well, we're going to let that pass. I'm going to choose something different. How about this is my current experience? Again, I'm moving through this. This is painful, but I can do it. I can move through this every day, and I'm going to go at my own pace. It's hard to encapsulate in this one conversation how that process went. It's really difficult. Plus, the thing about trauma is that, especially when it affects your sleep, which for many of us, when you're healing from significant trauma, you're not sleeping too well. It's hard to lock in memory. Memory gets locked in deep sleep state. And when your nervous system is dysregulated, that interferes with memory production. So trying to recall to the best of my ability exactly what went down is difficult. But for me, it was about the intentionality of the process. And for anybody who didn't hear from the last episode, my husband and I worked through that process for 4 months after we lost a child. And to our shock and amazement, 4 months later, we felt a lightness of being that we didn't have before. That surprised us. Who would have thought that it could be possible to heal from a loss like that, to the degree where you notice a lightness of being,
especially in that time frame? 4 months. That's
4 months. Holy crap. And we felt so much better by being deliberate and intentional with our healing journey, that after 4 months, we looked at each other and it was like, it feels weird saying this, but I'm kind of ready to try again. Are you? And he's like, yeah, I am too.
Both were on the same wavelength.
And there was nothing in that was about replacing the child we'd lost. That wasn't even a thought in our mind. And of course we never could and never would. But we really did feel better. And then, luckily for us, and I really do believe we were able to get pregnant again so quickly and be able to move into that next stage of life because we had healed so much. I think if we hadn't, and especially for me, if my nervous system hadn't recuperated to the point that it had, and I relieved myself of the, you know, constant emotional intensity,
Yeah.
it probably would have been a lot harder.
Sure.
Agreed. But we did, and then we ended up with our perfect, beautiful child.
Yes. And then we had this conversation after you had her, because I don't think you ever saw yourself, and we're going off on a tangent, but I don't think you ever saw yourself as just having one child. And we had this conversation because I didn't think I was just going to have one child.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember us when Violet was young, and I remember us having this conversation, I think on the phone. And I remember just telling you, because Max was obviously older. He's 5 years older than Violet. I think Violet's 9.
Something like that, yeah.
Violet's 9. Max is 14. But anyway, I remember us having this conversation about, you know, don't give in to the pressures of society that you have to have more than one kid. Like there were all these talks about, okay, you want him to have a sibling and you want it and I just remember having that deep conversation about it's okay to have one kid and be completely fulfilled and feel like your life is complete. Because doesn't she complete your life?
100%.
Right?
And also,
Max
I don't ever want to be pregnant ever again.
No, me either. It was a horrible.
Some people love it.
Oh, it was
I know people. I have people in my life, family members, who just love being pregnant.
No.
They love I did not.
No,
I
was a big submarine. I was just like it's a huge blob, just walking around, just waiting for that baby to go.
Oh, no. And you know what? I just had another thought too. You know, we were talking earlier about. In your case, what is supportive of you in your healing journey is taking action.
Mm-hmm.
It was those symbolic gestures of taking action.
Mm-hmm.
It just popped into my head with the first birth.
Mm-hmm.
And I did go through the process of giving birth to a child I knew that I wasn't going to be able to take home.
Yeah.
That was a whole extra trauma on top of it.
Of course.
And it happened in such a way that was completely contradictory to the original plan that I had before we got the terminal diagnosis. I had planned on having him in a birthing center. I wanted a natural birth, birthing center with like, you know, the soft lights and the birthing tub and like the whole thing. Like I had my music all picked out and everything. So I had this vision of this really peaceful, special experience that I was going to do around the birth of this child. Well, when we found out that it was a terminal pregnancy, we got kicked out. Of course, we got kicked out of the birthing center. They're like, sorry, this is not the kind of situation that we can support you in.
Correct.
And I ended up having a hospital birth, which for me was not what I wanted.
Sure.
And the whole thing for me of going through the loss of the child and the loss of the birth that I wanted, specifically being in letting go of that plan, being in a location I didn't want to be in, that was its own extra trauma. And so with the second one, for me, the action, the choice that I made and the action that I took to rewrite the script for myself, which was part of my healing journey, is I decided with the second birth that I was going to have a home birth.
Yeah. And you did.
And I did.
And you did.
And it was freaking amazing. And it was so healing.
I was so proud of you.
It was so incredibly healing for me. And I didn't necessarily know at the time that that's why I was choosing it. I think I just was like, I'm just going to do the opposite of what just happened.
I think you wanted to also be in control. Like, you know, unfortunately you lost control of that birthing plan with Jackson. And I think you wanted to have control of this birth. You wanted
I wanted to rewrite the script. I wanted to create a new memory around the subject of giving birth to a child and getting to keep this one, but also making it as optimal and perfect of an experience as I could control.
Yeah.
Right. In any birthing situation, you don't know what's going to freaking happen.
No.
But
I just got lucky.
I was able to have this incredible experience.
Yeah.
In my home that felt safe and with the dim lights and the music and the only people around are the professionals there to support me and my family, and everyone got to be there that I wanted to be there. The softness of my own bed, like every single aspect of it was as best as it could possibly be from my perspective. And making that choice was incredibly healing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was a good experience for you. Kudos to you. I mean, 4 centimeters in, and I was like, give me the damn epidural. Like I was not, and I ended up, my birthing plan didn't go as planned either. I had to have a C-section. So anyway, never going to go through that again. Never. Cause I'm not having any more children. I'm done. So for me, just to touch on this about, did I surprise myself in this healing process? I think for me, it's been more recent. I think, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but just over the last 6 weeks, I was working with a grief counseling meditation coach, and that has completely, I mean, revolutionized my healing process with this grief. I remember the first 2 sessions, we were meeting weekly, once a week for an hour. And her name is Robin. Robin, we're going to have you on the podcast soon because she is such a wealth of just healing and knowledge. And she's just such a little soft spirit. So can't wait to have her on. We are when we start having guests. But for me, that I can't, like the first 2 sessions I remember were really hard. I remember having just like the sobbing conversations with her. And the last 3 sessions, it was like you said, you felt that weight lifted when you were ready to try to get pregnant with Violet. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally when that 3rd session started on that Wednesday evening, I just remember I didn't cry. I just felt lighter. We were able to talk about my father and talk about all these things without getting choked up. I was able to talk about other avenues of my life or other areas of my life. And it was just, I did surprise myself because I was like, wow, yeah, it's happening. Like healing is happening for me. It's happening through this whole process. And she was really an integral part of that.
And it's really important to have that acknowledgement of yourself and recognize how far you've come.
It felt so good.
How much lighter you feel.
Yes. Uh-huh. It felt so good. So, wrapping this up today, just a little bit of talk to our listeners specifically. You're not alone. It takes time. This is a process. And with grief, everyone's different. So we've said this several times, give yourself grace. Healing and grief is not linear. For me, it's been a roller coaster and it's been up and down. And I'm just starting, again, in the last 7 weeks to just feel this like more of a linear feel. That doesn't mean it's going to stay like that. But I just think that, if you're listening and you're dealing with grief, to just acknowledge where you are now and just know it's not going to feel like this forever. It's not. It's going to change. And to acknowledge too that healing is happening. Like even if you're in the depths of despair and you're crying and you're having a rough day, that is the healing. That's part of the healing. So acknowledging that and being able to move forward, I think is so useful.
And letting go of the judgment of where you're at.
Yeah.
Letting go of the judgment of where you're at. It's okay to acknowledge where you are as an observation. But resisting the urge to judge it, because as soon as you do that, you lock yourself into where you are. Mm-hmm. And this is, maybe this is something we need to save for the next episode, but it's about letting go of resistance to what is, because again, like we mentioned earlier, in many cases with grief, these are things that you cannot change. Mm-hmm. And when you're in resistance to something that is an unchangeable set of circumstances, mm-hmm. you lock yourself into the past. Mm-hmm. You can't allow yourself to move forward.
Yeah.
So letting go of the judgment of where you're at, having grace and allowance for yourself and for your process, mm-hmm. but remembering that it's very important to let go of the resistance of it and get through whatever methods that you choose. And, as we move through time here, we hope to share some of the methods, some of the more methods that worked for us, mm-hmm. but finding your way to acceptance and allowance of what is that's going to be a really, really big piece,
Mm-hmm.
especially to keep yourself unstuck and to begin making progress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And maybe we'll touch more on that in the next episode, since we're looking at about an hour now.
Yes. So guys, we're going to wrap it up, but we would love to hear from you. We want to know what you think, if anything that we said has helped you or sparked
Or
some
resonated
thought
with you.
or resonated with you. So feel free to message us, share, comment, give us 5 stars if you feel the need. But we're just so happy to be here. We really are. And we're so happy to be together.
And we want to
too.
know what has worked for you. If you have tools on your tool belt that have helped you process through big, heavy things, share that. Share that in the comments. We check every one of them. In many of these platforms that we're on, we can't reply directly to you, but we pay attention to all of that, and
we read them all.
We read them all. They touch us all, and we really want to connect with you. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your feedback, and engage in the conversation.
Yeah. So that's it, guys. That wraps up episode 4.
Holy crap!
The Why of It All. We will be back next week with another episode. So thank you so much.
We love you.
We love you.